which is by Pawan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pawan Govindaraju, and I'm from the Department of Mechanical Engineering. I'm currently a sophomore, and today I'll be talking about creativity and self-awareness in robots. Okay, so I won't be focusing more on robots. I will mostly deal with automated systems. I will be trying to talk about the way in which these systems emulate the thinking of the human beings. So, I would like to start with a small incident in the life of Richard Phillips Feynman. So, like most graduate students, even he had to take a humanities course during his course of education, and he had to submit a final assignment which summed up the contents of the course. So, Feynman didn't exactly enjoy that course. He barely understood what the professor said, and most of the time, despite sitting in the front row, he barely understood the professor. Most of the time, he could only hear mumbles. So, one day when he submitted the assignment, he could all of a sudden understand what the professor was saying by listening to what he said. So, this is how Feynman puts it. All of a sudden, from the middle of nowhere, I heard this. I'm Obama, I'm Obama, I'm Obama, I'm Maba. So, in a way, what he could hear were mumbles, but he could identify that it was his work. So, why I have put this in my talk is that it just shows to the extent to which we question our existence, how deep we think. I mean, we always try to associate some meaning to every moment of our lives. And this is what great minds like Feynman think about. I wonder why, I wonder why, I wonder why, I wonder. So that is two levels to which he's questioning his thinking. And the next line takes it even further, and you could very well generalize it to infinity. Then comes Descartes. Okay, Descartes was a sick man to say. Most of his childhood he was bedridden, and so he had plenty of time to think about such trivial things. We mostly associate Descartes with the phrase cogito ergo sum, so which roughly translates to I think therefore I exist. So this phrase itself is proof for our existence. That is what he argues. This is a highly debated topic, but still the essence is there. I think, therefore, I exist. It is self-explanatory, and there have been other arguments as well, similar to this. For example, there was one philosopher called Zan. Excuse me. Okay, so what Avicenna said that. So imagine a man in an infinite void. So that's how it got its name as a floating man experiment. And he would be receiving sensory inputs, but he would be able to control his thoughts. He would just not keep himself busy by processing the information he's receiving from his sense organs. He can control his thoughts, and that is what makes a human being. So this is what he says, and this is what self-awareness actually is. It's your ability to choose thoughts, not just spend time by processing the information which you're receiving from your sense organs. Okay, so where and what we actually are. This is a very fascinating idea. There have been several cultural references to this topic, and looks like it has even creeped into TV show scripts. Okay, this is a interesting argument given by Sheldon, so pay attention, it might be complex.
You know how I know we're not in the Matrix? How? If we were, the food would be better.
Okay, so thinking about tests for self-awareness, a being need not be as smart as Feynman. It need not come up with complicated arguments to question its existence. We just need to see whether it's able to recognize itself. It's a basic requirement. Mean when there is input from visionary organs, is it able to recognize itself? Is it able to control that flow of thoughts? So research has shown that apes, humans, dolphins are able to recognize their reflection. So this can be emulated in robots. It's not a problem. Just have to teach it different ways of recognizing itself. And even we human beings take time. We have plenty of time, right? So an average human lifespan is somewhere around 60 years, and all the time it is getting information and that is being processed. So during that processing, it learns a lot. Let's see a video which demonstrates the difference in reactions between a dog and an ape when they confront their mirror image.
This chimp appears to know that that's her tongue and those are her teeth.
Okay, now moving on to creativity. These two things, creativity and self-awareness, they might appear to be different things, but at the end of the presentation, you will realize the fact that one thing demands the other. Okay, so let's look at a vague definition of creativity. It's just the ability to make things by borrowing from previous ideas and observations. So even like most cognitive science topics, this is also debated a lot. One of the authors has made an audacious attempt at defining it, but at the end of the paragraph, he concludes by saying that human beings don't have enough creativity to come up with a definition of creativity. So there are various classifications of creativity. This makes things easier. Margaret Borden, she is a well-known expert in the field of cognitive sciences. Do look at her blog. They might be boring, but still, if you go through all the articles, you will find some gems in them. So she classifies creativity in two ways, P and H creativity. So ideas can either be psychologically creative or historically creative. So psychologically creative means that that idea was existing somewhere else but is being applied in an apt location. So that demands some skill. And historical creativity is the ability to think about something which hasn't been thought before. Computers find it hard to mimic natural intelligence. That is something which the press has already highlighted enough about it. Partly because they base themselves on rigid instructions. Instructions, they guide it, but they unintentionally create constraints. So most programs, at least the kind of programming which we have done so far, I don't think we will be able to think of programs which don't have predefined outputs. Many attempts have been made to go across and try to make unpredictable output giving programs. So this has been done by trying to model the human brain. So this is what we can expect, right? We are unable to think of a solution on our own, so why not borrow ideas from Mother Nature herself? This has been done in several other topics, and even the previous talks have also highlighted about it. A simple idea would be to follow the architecture of a neuron. A neuron just can be assumed to be an abstract model consisting of fibers called dendrites which emerge out of it, and there is something known as an axon, and that can be imagined as a main transmitting cable, and each of these dendrites can be associated with a weight. So what happens is that when a signal comes to its input end, it is associated with a weight. That means it's either amplified or its intensity is reduced appropriately, and that is transmitted to the axon through the axon. So the cell body of the neuron is known as cyton, and this has been abstracted by considering it to be a function. So if the input to it is greater than a threshold, a function is performed, and if it's less, something else is done. This simple abstraction is responsible for most robots, most applications which involve artificial intelligence around us. Moving on, there are many models of creativity, and most of them agree on this fact. The one thing common between all these models and the human brain, we can become more creative by becoming better at storing information. So information is called knowledge, and we should be able to retrieve it very quickly. These are the two essential facts, and that is what makes something more creative and less creative. This is a central problem in cognitive sciences and is known as a problem of knowledge representation. So language is one way in which we can convey ideas, in which we can store what we infer from nature. So there are abstract models as well. For example, propositional logic is also a method of representing knowledge. It might be very easy to infer from propositional logic, at least for human beings. For example, I might assume that you are aware of logic symbols, right? So you can take a very simple example. You won't find it hard to infer. And even languages are also a method of representing knowledge. For example, I might give this talk in English in 20 minutes, but it might take me a lot more time. For example, if I choose Entish, I might not finish this talk. And progress has been made in specific areas related to this topic. So that is because of necessity. We needed to handle linguistics and symbol manipulation. That is what was demanded. So more progress has been made in that direction, and there are several forms of creativity. I will mostly be concentrating on linguistic, mathematical, and artistic creativity. So linguistic creativity. If you are following the word games seen in the institute, so whatever appears or whatever is being discussed in those sessions, that is in some way related to linguistic creativity. Puns, sarcasm, irony, story writing, poetry writing, and even jokes. So these are all forms of linguistic creativity. So computers try to tackle this problem, trying to solve word games, trying to solve crosswords. First thing which they found easy to solve were puns. That is because they were primarily based on search algorithms, and they were already well studied, and several abstract models have been created which helped in faster searching methods. So I will be discussing one application called Tom Swifties. So you might have heard of these before. This is how a normal Tom Swiftie would look like. Only one of my speakers works. Set Tom dash. So you are supposed to fill it with an appropriate adverb. For example, in this case, if you would fill it with monotonously, you can observe the pun, right? Only one of my speaker works. Said Tom monotonously. So you can think of several examples of this kind, and it's very interesting also. It's very hard to cook up the adverb after looking at the sentence. The next thing which has been tackled were riddles. I'm not aware of what JAPE stands for, but there's a tool for generating funny acronyms in the internet. I tried putting JAPE in it, and it gave the output as just another pointless exercise. So JAPE is a riddle generator, which was the next step. And all this happened in the late 90s, surprisingly. Partly because that is when applications were demanded, and that is when we had enough computing power also. So here's one example of a riddle which has been generated by JAPE. So what's the difference between a pretty glove and a silent cat? One is a cute mitten and the other is a mute kitten. So it might not be funny, but uh, we can't expect more from computers, right? So if computers had a very good sense of humor, Robo would have been over very quickly. Moving on to linguistic creativity of a different manner, I will be talking about a game show called Jeopardy. So Jeopardy is a quiz game show where contestants are asked tricky questions often filled with puns. I'll be demonstrating one question.
Less than a minute now. Tool time for 200. This term for a long-handled gardening tool can also mean an immoral pleasure seeker. Ken. What's a hoe? No. Whoa. 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 They teach you that in school in Utah, huh, Al? What's a rake? A rake is right. You select, Al. 400, please.
Okay, so you observe that it's quite difficult and becomes very, and the topics are also very diverse. So for a computer to tackle such a problem, it is truly a challenge. So this was a publicity stunt similar to Deep Blue, pulled off by IBM, and it had literally dominated the competition. The next slide will show the final score. So that's just a representation of Watson, and it was an array of computers. So that was in the background, and it was not connected to the internet. It had the power of 3000 computers and had terabytes of memory. It was allowed to learn on its own for over a period of 3 months. So it could pick up whatever it could in that time. And in the quiz show, it always made probable answers. It made a list of probable answers, and it would go for an appropriate guess. Moving on to mathematical creativity. So when it comes to calculations, we've already accepted the fact that computers are way better than us. Now we are concentrating on proving theorems and framing conjectures, whether computers will be able to do that or not. They might seem to be very different things, proving theorems, verifying, framing conjectures, but if the P versus NP conjecture or controversy is, if that is resolved, so that might unify it to some extent. This next video will tell something about mathematical creativity, courtesy of Cornell University.
For centuries, scientists have attempted to document the analytical laws that underlie physical phenomena in nature. We have developed a technique for extracting laws of nature automatically from experimental data. We do this by searching for invariant and conservation relationships that various systems obey. We demonstrated this approach by automatically searching motion tracking data which we captured from a variety of physical systems. Without any prior knowledge about physics, kinematics, or geometry, this algorithm discovered Hamiltonians, Lagrangian equations, and other laws of geometric and momentum conservation.
Okay, so as I'm running out of time, I would like to move to artistic creativity. So it started with simple drawing machines, and those who were there for TechFest, there was one kiosk which was related to this. You might have seen that. So there's another video in my presentation, and that will talk about a more advanced drawing machine. It has in fact evolved for over 30 years, and be prepared to be mesmerized.
An artist named Aaron takes art to a new level with technology. Aaron draws and paints still life in a way that many artists had never dreamed of just 10 years ago. His work tends towards the abstract, and his artwork utilizes computers in a way never seen before. Yet what makes his work different from the work of other artists? Aaron is a computer program developed in 1973 by Harold Cohen. There is no one behind the screen. Aaron's process is completely automated. He is a computer who can paint. Aaron's painting and drawing abilities are still primitive, but in just 30 years he has come a long way from the scribbles he began with. It's enough to make some artists a bit nervous. Even Cohen himself has not practiced art since the beginning of this lifelong career project. What started as an experiment in computer intelligence has also resulted in the end of Cohen's individual artistic career. Clearly, computers have affected the perception of art. Many find Aaron's work to be surprising, despite knowledge that computer-aided art has been around for quite some time. Still, many artists feel that they are not threatened in the least.
So I'll just touch one more topic of mathematical creativity, and that is automated theorem proving. So I've talked about how computers are very good at computations, and this is one field which is promising. Theorem proving is not only about logical deductions. For example, chess is also a brain game, and it involves a lot of logical deductions. It involves coming up with novel strategies on the spot, at least for human beings. Kasparov was, everyone must have heard of him. He was beaten 4 points to 2 when he faced Deep Jr. That was somewhere around 10 years ago. So that just shows that that computers are able to beat even the best players when it comes to complicated brain games like chess. So why not try to use them for proving theorems? How this is done is that the theorem or the problem is framed using formal logic, and it comes up with several deductions, but it accepts only the ones which are produced by fixed strategies. So I hope everyone's aware with formal logic that has been assumed. Bottom up introducing, top down elimination, these are two methods. If the deduction is due to these, only then it accepts it. One more thing which is introduced in addition to that is the notion of judgment. So only two kinds of deductions, deductions associated with only two kinds of judgments are accepted. There should either be a normal deduction. That means the statement should be obtainable either while proceeding from bottom to up by introducing, or from top to down by elimination, or it should be directly an extract from the hypothesis. There are some problems which have been proved by automated theorem provers. For example, the Robbins conjecture. Huntington, this was somewhere in the 1920s, Huntington proved that commutativity, associativity, and the below axiom are enough for a system to be a Boolean algebra. Robbins claimed that the above axiom could be replaced with the one below, and it was only in 1996 that this could be proved, and that too using an automated theorem prover. So this just shows the power of these abstract computational systems. So these are not exactly algorithms, they are a collection of heuristics, and they proceed after given a problem, they proceed and they even learn from that. Coming back to self-awareness in robots. So we've talked so far about creativity. So why do we need creativity? Robots need to be creative in order to recognize themselves or their parts in various situations. For example, one good application is that the robot should be able to recognize its lost part, and if it's able to repair it, then it's well and good. So image search might not always work. One exercise which you could do on your own is that if you drop 5 keys, including yours, in a dark room, how would you find yours? So there is promising research in this field, and there is a very short video clip which I would like to show. So this is also courtesy of Cornell University. So what this is, it is a robot which is able to replicate on its own. Replication means given the raw materials, it's able to construct similar copies of itself, and it's able to join and form one unified robot which performs the same function. So this is in a controlled environment where it requires power sources. You can observe the different platforms underneath it. So they are the power sources. What it's doing is that when its blocks are dispersed, it's able to collect it and assemble itself, and it's also able to break itself into parts, and those molecules, that is what the professor calls it, they are able to function independently. So you've learned that they can replicate. A natural question is that can they evolve? I'll be talking about a similar, very common I mean, you must have come across this in the internet. It's Boxcar 2D. So the aim of this game is that you have to design a car and it's made to encounter rugged terrain. It restarts and evolves after it breakdowns or if it flips. So there are some screenshots of it. So this is how it works. Each car is just a set of 8 randomly chosen vectors. It chooses whether or not to put a wheel at each vertex. And there is one vector. This vector is different. I mean, this is a data type. It's the chromosome, and that's the most important part of it. So the basic implementation of Boxcar has a 16 plus 3k length vector. So 16 is for the vertices, angle and the magnitude. 3k is for the wheel radius, axle angle and the vertex to which the wheel is supposed to be attached. So this is one simple variation of the selection algorithm. There are several other algorithms which Boxcar uses. So for each car A, it picks a random car B excluding A. Highest score of A and B wins. The scoring scheme is given in the website. So the winner is put in the mating pool and randomly picks pairs from the mating pool and perform the crossover. So this is how the children will look like. You can observe that there are some common features. In fact, the features which have been borrowed, they have been done so using the same color. This clearly shows how the features have been inherited. There is also scope for mutation. For example, there will be some specific values of the vector which can be perturbed with a specific probability. So due to lack of time, I am unable to show a demo. So when is it that we will see real life applications of these concepts? I would like to quote Douglas Hofstadter regarding this concept. There's a very famous law. It will take longer than you expect, even when you take into consideration the Hofstadter's law. Thank you to MNP for giving me an opportunity to give a talk on a model.